this video, we are going to learn about modules and visibility. So modules is a way to construct our code. So far, we've been just using the main.rs, but we can use many files like we use in other programming languages. So modules are like classes in other languages. They are not exactly classes, but they create the same basic separation that we are having with other programming languages. So using the modules, we can create private code parts and we can connect these parts to our project. Since we've been working with a couple of examples so far, we didn't need to use a comprehensive module structure, but in a real life application, if you want to create a Rust program, it's most probably that you are going to use modules and visibility. So let's get started with the modules. To create a module, I'm going to use the mod keyword here, and then I will say sports. So the name of my module here is sports, and inside this module, I can create another module or can have structs, I can have functions. So let's create our first function. I'm going to call it function, let's say football. I'm living in Los Angeles, so what everyone calls football is actually the American football, but just know that when I mean football, I mean soccer, the original one. After we set function football, let's define this function, and inside this, I will say println, and inside this, let's say, let's play football. Then we are going to say, actually, with our foot, because that's where the name comes from, football. Okay, now we have a module and we have a function in it. Now let's see how we can use this function. In our main, I want to call this function. For that, I'm going to say sports and then two semicolons. After that, I will say football and save it. As you can see, after we save it, we have an error here. And it says that function football is private. So even though they are on the same file, this function in this module is private. So we cannot use this code with other parts of the file, even though they're in the same file. For that reason, we need to make this public. So Rust is a very private programming language. I don't know if you have noticed, but everything in Rust is by default private. It's like everything in Rust by default immutable. So that's the way of Rust saying that, all right, I want to secure my functions, my modules, my structures. I want to secure my code as a private. So if you want to use them as public, you need to tell me that you want to use them as public. Because if something goes wrong, instead of leaking some information, we will be holding that information, which is much easier to catch during the development process. So after saying public, as you can see, we have no more errors. And now let's create another function here, or we can even create a struct as we talked. Let's create a struct and say that football player. Let's go like this. We will have the name field, which will be a string, and also the age field, which will be I32. Now let's create a new football player here. I'm going to call him Messi. For that, we are going to say sports. And as you can see, after we put two semicolons here, it directly says football, but it doesn't say football player as another option. The reason is that we also need to use public keyword with this struct. So it's applicable to any code that we are writing, any structure, any function, whatever we are creating, it's applicable to all of them. Here, as you can see, now we have the football and the football player. And for the football player, we are going to say name will be Messi, the toString, and also the age will be, let's say 19, because I think that was the best age of him. Now we have another problem once we saved our code. If we check this out, it says private field. So even though we set public for our struct here, we also need to specify these as public. After doing this, we got rid of our errors. So just notice that everything that we create, we need to specify as public or not. Even though we specify this structure as public, we also need to specify the fields, because maybe we want people to access the name but not the age. So for that reason, again, everything in Rust is private by default. We need to specify as public, but don't think a lot over this problem, because it's not even a problem over this feature, because Rust is going to force you to use it. So even though you forget, no worries, you are going to remember just after a second you saved your file. Alright, now we know what modules are. We know how we can use them with publicly and privately. Now let's see how we can import them. So here we said sports football, but instead of this, I could have said use sports and football. So this means that I want to use the football function from the sports. So to call the function, I can easily say football like this here, so that I don't have to use this structure all the time. And also I can take this from the main and put it on top, and as you can see, we got no problem. So let's say cargo build and followed by cargo run, and it says let's play football actually with our foot. So that's how we can create our structure and create our module and import our module in our code. But also we don't want to import every module from the same file, because it creates the same problem. Our code is too big, it's not structured, it's not too big yet, but in a project it will be too big, and we need to have different files so that we can put different code in a different file, and then in the main we are going to basically call the codes from the corresponding files, and we are going to use them. So in general, main is the place where we use the functions and everything we created. It's not for a place to create everything inside, especially for medium to larger projects. So to separate this code, first I'm going to cut this out. And let's delete this. Yes, we don't have a function called football. Now, as you can see, I have a separate file here. If I click this file and paste the code here, I no longer need to specify this a module, because the file itself is a module. So I'm going to delete these and save it. Now I have another file called sports.rs, which have my function and structure. In my main, I'm going to say mod sports on top. This mod sports just letting our main file to know that we have a module called sports, and it gets the name from the name of the file. And we can say use sports, and from the sports we can have football, and from the sports we also want to use the football player. But what if we had like 10 modules, and in those 10 modules we had like 10 functions each? Then we would have to do like 100 imports here. So instead, if we want to import the function specifically, what we can do is, instead of this, we can go like football and football player, which imports both of us at the same time. And inside this, I will say, let my player, I'm going to say football player, and for the name, I will have Simon, and as the age, I will say 26. Now I was able to create my player. Now let's run our football function. And as you can see here, we have the same functionality, and this way we can create separate files, put the necessary code in it, and in our main we are going to let our Rust know that we have a module actually in this file, and then after letting Rust know what's happening here, we are saying, okay, now I want to use them. So once we set a mode, we are saying, yeah, there is something, a sport exists, but it doesn't mean that we want to use them. To use it, we have a separate keyword which is very easy to remember for this context, which is use. And then we are defining our necessary functions or structures, whatever we want to use in it. That's all for the modules. And be careful with the modules. We don't want to create too many files. We don't want to separate our code too much if it's unnecessary. And also at the same time, we don't want to put everything in just the main file. So thank you very much, and I will see you on the next one.